Hey everyone, how's it going? So what am I working on now? I have got my customer's 2004 Chevy Silverado. I think I made a video briefly on this. He drives 4 hours to bring his vehicles to me. He had his gray truck here with the one with the big block. I put motor mounts in it. I didn't make a video on that, but I did a few other things that I made a video on. I think it was the front brakes. But anyway, so his complaint is a check engine light. He wanted me to replace the starter. This one has broken motor mounts too. I'll make a video on that because a lot of you were like, why didn't you show you changing the motor mounts on it? Okay, well, because I had just done a set of motor mounts on one. So I'll show changing the motor mounts on this. I got to change upper control arms. I got to put 2 new upstream O2 sensors in it. It's got a code for the bank 2 sensor 1 for the circuit insufficient, and then it's also got a heater performance code. I'm going to tell you right now, anytime you see a single O2 sensor with a heater performance code, I have never seen it be anything but an O2 sensor. So the fact that these 2 codes are on the same O2 sensor, I'm going to put an O2 sensor in it. Oh, this is the one he's complaining about lack of power. I think I said that. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm putting 2 O2s in it, just because I don't think they've ever been changed. I mean, they probably have at some point, but I don't know. It's got 300,000 miles on it. The other code that this thing has, and I made a video on this a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's got, here, let me show you. PO327 knock sensor 1, PO332 knock sensor 2, circuit low frequency. What does that mean? That means that the knock sensors are not showing enough activity, basically. That's what that means. I'm going to show you the ohm test that I'm going to do, but I've decided, because I've already fixed this, it was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I put 2 new 2 new knock sensors in this thing, and I remember ohming everything out, and everything was fine because they're underneath the intake, so you have to do it from a jumper harness. I remember ohming everything out and thinking everything was fine. Excuse me. But he said, this was shortly before I left over in that area where I was. He said, like a month or so later, the check engine light came back on. But he wasn't overly concerned because it was driving fine. Now he's got the complaint of lack of power. So it could be a combination of the knock sensors, because I've explained before, knock sensors will retard timing. And if they're not exactly where they're supposed to be, it can really screw up timing. Also, the O2 sensors, which are the main control for fuel, because it needs to know how much fuel is getting into the exhaust, how much oxygen concentration is in the exhaust, it goes by that. So if it's got a dead O2 or 2 O2s that are slow, yeah, that can really affect performance. And I drove this thing home and I was just like, man, this thing really is a turd. So what I'm going to show you is I got 2 new Delphi knock sensors, and I have an old harness from one of my motors at the house. And I know the harness is good, that's why I was holding on to it. If I got to use it in here, then I'm going to use it in here. But I don't think there's a problem with the harness. What I think, possibly, I'm not sure, there was a run of counterfeit knock sensors a few years ago. They're still out there as far as I know. Because I actually bought these knock sensors from Advanced Auto Parts at the time, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. The counterfeit knock sensors actually had a resistor built into them to try to keep the check engine light off. Problem is they don't see any activity. There has to be a change in the resistance while you're driving. It has to see movement to know that the knock sensors are working. If it doesn't see movement, it's like, the computer starts to think, something's not quite right here. So then it throws the light on. Okay, let me show you. I gotta go get a tripod. I don't know where I put my tripod. But I gotta go get my tripod, and I'm gonna show you something here. I got the 2 new ones hooked up to a wiring harness, and I got my ohm meter, and I'm gonna show you what happens to them I want to show you the readings, and then we're going to go to the vehicle. I'm going to show you the readings, and then I can't show you the test until I take the intake off. So let's go ahead and do this. Let me get a tripod. All right, so here we go. Let me just get you where you can see this. So these are the knock sensors. And here's that harness that I was telling you about. Oops, hold on, caught on this tripod. Here's the harness I was telling you about. And I have it tagged into one of the, or this one, knock sensor. So you see it's 100 kilo ohms, basically. Now I'm going to pretend it's in the car. And let's say the car starts detonating. See how it's jumping all over the place? Then it kind of goes steady. I think it's because my hand is on the connector there. It pretty much goes steady, but if this was actually mounted down to the motor, it's much different than me just like free floating it here. It's like it's basically like a motor mount now in my hand. But see how it changes? We'll just switch to the other one. I just have to switch plug. And it's roughly the same number. See how it changes? All right, so that's what it's supposed to do. So now what we're going to do is let's go to the truck. And like I said, I can't tap on the sensors because they're under the intake manifold. So let me get what I need here. All right. So now the ground itself, I'm going to hook to the ground on the chassis. I think you could see that. It's on the alternator bracket here, which is actually the jump start ground. All right. So now the connector for the knock sensors is right here. And it mounts up here. I disconnected already. This is the wiring harness from the motor, or from the engine harness. So now I'm going to connect to one of the two. As you see, it's reading 99.6, 99.7 kilo ohms. I'm going to switch to the other one, and it's reading about 99.8. Okay, close enough. So that tells me that's all good. But I'm seriously thinking that I got something going on underneath that intake. So I got to pull the intake off. The other things I got to do on this thing, like I said, I got to do motor mounts on this. I have to do the Hydro Boost brake booster, which is that piece back there, because it's leaking power steering fluid like crazy. So, yeah, let me go ahead and let me get that intake off. I'm not going to walk you through pulling the intake off of this, but I just want to get down to the knock sensors themselves. I don't know if I mentioned it, but there was a string of counterfeit knock sensors, and really all that's inside of them is a resistor, and the resistor is just to keep the light off for a period of time. The resistor is not going to vary like a knock sensor is actually supposed to. So I'm curious if it's possible I got counterfeits. I could probably go back to the store where I got them from, or whatever. They're $50 a piece. If I got to eat it, I got to eat it, because the store is 4 hours away from here. You know, I mean, I can call Eric over there, and I'm sure he would probably do something for me, but it's already been 2 years, so technically it's out of warranty. I'm just doing this as a favor to the customer because he's a great customer. So let me go ahead, let me get that intake off, and let's see where this winds up. Okay, everything's unbolted. I usually unbolt the throttle body and leave it in there because it's got two coolant hoses going to it. And I'd rather do that than drain the coolant out, to be honest with you. It's just as easy. It's just 3 bolts, and it could just sit there. It's got 5 intake bolts here that go down, and they're kind of captured in the intake manifold itself. sometimes they'll slide out, sometimes they won't, but see that? I think I got them all loose. Didn't I get them all loose? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the whole intake manifold should move. It should come out. So I got the harnesses disconnected, fuel line disconnected. It should come up and out. I think it should. Oh, battery's disconnected too. Because you're dealing with an alternator right here. I don't want to take a chance at possibly shorting something out. Now, also, I don't know if you can see this. This tube here is the vent for the purge, and it has a tendency to get hung up because it goes in between. It goes in between the fuel rail on the driver's side here. It's a little bit of a pain in the neck to get out of where it has to go. Not that big a deal. Now, some of the ones that have a vacuum booster towards the back of the intake are going to have a vacuum hose. Since this has Hydro Boost, it doesn't have that. So there we go. Intake's off. I mean, it really wasn't difficult. So now, down inside here, that's where your knock sensors are. And as you see, I siliconed them in place because that was a common problem of getting water down there. So I'm really curious as to what happened. Yeah, let me break that silicone free and let me get the connectors up and out and get the sensors up and out. Did I over torque the knock sensors? It's possible. I just don't remember. But actually, let me get a vacuum so I can vacuum all of this stuff out. I just don't want it floating around, dropping inside the motor. So let me do that first. All right, so I got that thing cleaned up. And you're actually interfering. Me filming this is interfering with me listening to Motorhead today. So, you should feel privileged. You guys came before Motorhead. People often ask me, I don't know why people often ask me this, but they're like, what kind of music do you listen to in the shop? It varies. I am a old school, hard rock, heavy metal type of person. Like I said, I was listening to Motorhead just now. Yeah, and I will listen to like Motorhead, Judas Priest. I'm a big Metallica fan, early Metallica fan, that is. I'm just trying to get underneath here. But I listen to pretty much everything. Pretty much everything. I'm not a huge rap music fan, although I like Eminem. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that I'm like a Taylor Swift fan or anything like that. I don't have anything against her. I think she does have a few catchy songs, but not my cup of tea. I will actually, believe it or not, listen to somebody like Enya. I will listen to blues. I love like R.L. Burnside, stuff like that. So it really depends on my mood, but more often than not, I have a tendency to always go back to like heavy metal type of music, especially the earlier stuff like I said, Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or Black Sabbath, AC/DC, stuff like that. Although I do like Slipknot. I think Slipknot is fantastic. Although lately I don't think so. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff I listen to. All right, as you see, I broke that silicone free, so now I kind of got to get down there and disconnect these connectors. These can be a bit of a pain, the way these connectors are designed. So I got to get down there. with one of these type of pliers to squeeze the connector, because it's down inside a hole there. If you got skinny fingers, you could probably get in here, but I can't. All right. So that one's disconnected. That one's disconnected. All right, so we're just going to take the harness out for now. That rear one, if I remember correctly, that rear one had gotten moisture in it from before. I don't think it's, because I don't know if you can see it, it's like discolored. But if you look inside the holes, see that one and that one? I think that one had gotten water in it and it had ruined the knock sensor, and I had said, well, while we're at it, we may as well put 2 knock sensors in it. At that point, why bother with one? So, all right, let me get those out of there. All right, so let's knock these sensors out of here. They're only supposed to be torqued to, I believe, 15 foot-pounds. It's not an incredible amount. And they don't go into a water jacket or anything like that. They basically just bottom out in the block. I think these might have been CarQuest brand. Those are out. I got a funny feeling these are CarQuest brand. All right, let me set up and do the same test like I did before. I'm really curious to see if these things change or not. All right, hang on. You did see that, right? This one got a little discolored, but I got a funny feeling it's because of the rust that's in the hole. Probably just got to it a little bit. They appear to be the same. I don't know. Okay, weird. All right, yeah, let me set this up. Okay, so one thing I wanted to show you here is before we hook this meter up. So we're setting it to ohms. All right, let's just do this before I do what I want to do. I'm going to hook this up. Hooking this up here. Hooking this into the end of the connector here. Okay. Oh, it automatically did it. Okay. All right, so 99.9. Most of the time you have to zero the meter because otherwise sometimes it gets a wonky readings. And what I mean by zero the meter is this. You take the leads and you actually connect them together. Actually, I don't like that. Hold on a second. Where is my... It's actually reading kind of high. I wonder why it's that high. And then you hit 0. Let's try that again. Okay, it is 0. All right, so now let's go back here. So if you notice, it's on ohms and I'm hooked up, but I got nothing. So you got to go into range. There we go, 99.9. All right, so what did I do before? I basically took like a screwdriver or whatever. Oh, dang it. Hang on a second. Yeah, all right, now that that's done, let's just see. Like I said, there could be absolutely nothing wrong with this, but the fact that it's setting that code, let's just see. All right, I am getting a change in that one. Why is this connector not happy? There it goes. I get almost no change out of this one. See that? Yeah, okay, so I get nothing out of that one. So, the one that actually looks a little worse seems to work better than the one that looks good. So, I'm wondering what the issue is there. Let me try it with the harness that I had in there. If I'm not mistaken, I actually replaced this harness too when I did this job. I just don't recall. Let me try plugging in the other harness and see. Just to see what my results are. So this is the harness that came out of the car. And like I said, this harness here that I was using for testing, that's one of my harnesses from one of my many motors I have at my house. All right, so let's hook up here just to see if we get any kind of a reading difference, that's all. All right, so we know we're there. 99.7, 99.8. I mean, I gotta hit that thing. It's not even that much. See that? But now this one, is changing. I'm going to get a reading. To me, that's not even that consistent, to be honest with you. Let me try the new ones. And we can compare them side by side, basically. It's like, where did I put the new ones? I put them right in front of my face. That's what I did then. And you notice the numbers are going up. On the other one, the numbers went down. So maybe it's not within the range. Oops, I gotta change the end here. Maybe it's not within the range the computer needs to see. Come on. All right. Yeah, massive change. And you see how quickly it changed too. So I'm confident I got defective knock sensors. I may actually cut one of those open just out of curiosity to see what they look like inside. Don't quote me on this. I don't remember. There's some piezo crystals or something in there that when agitated change resistance. And that's how these things work, because they pick up the detonation in the motor even very slightly, and it changes the resistance so that the computer knows that, hey, this thing's detonating. So I'm thinking I'm really curious if one of those just has a resistor in it. That's going to be interesting. I'm going to have to make I'll add it to this video, but I may have to make a separate video on that. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a separate video on that when I cut those open. All right, let's replace these knock sensors. I'm going to put the new harness in too, just in case. I'm going to save this other harness for myself because it would only be used on something that I would use for my own vehicles. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I figure I have the other one, I may as well use it. All right, let's get this ready. Let's put the new sensors in. All right, so let's install the new knock sensors. I got my torque wrench just got to disconnect them from the harness. I have it on the bench here. Whatever you do, don't drop these things. You drop them, you destroy them. If you accidentally drop one, you're going to wind up with a problem. So like I said, these don't go into oil or water or anything like that. They basically bolt down to a boss on the block. GM realized this wasn't such a great idea putting them here, and in 2007, they actually started mounting them on the side of the motor. If you remember on that one I did motor mounts on, I wound up breaking a knock sensor off the side of the motor. But they did this design here in the center from 99 to 2006, if I'm not mistaken. At least on this on these motors, on the 4.8, 5.3, and 6.0, up from 99 to from 99 to 06. Okay, so torque wrench is set to 15 foot-pounds. As you can see, that's actually not a lot. I may have over-torqued them before. Okay. Always zero out your torque wrench when you're done if you want it to last, because otherwise you could actually ruin the calibration of your torque wrench if you don't do that. Let me get the new harness, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some silicone. I'm going to silicone that back in place. Let me wipe that out first. All right, so I'm not going crazy cleaning off the old silicone, and the reason for that is this is not a sealing surface per se, as like, you know, if it's like an intake manifold gasket, or if it's a you know, water pump gasket or something where oil or coolant or whatever is going to pass through. This is only for keeping water from entering, so you don't have to go bananas doing that. So what I'm going to do is, I got some ultra black. I'm just going to put a coating. I hope I showed you that. Ultra black. Put a coating on the booty that goes down and around. All right, so a nice amount on there. So now you want to connect the connector itself first, obviously. Can't do it after. And then push the booty down over top. Usually I pull up on the wire, hold the wire a little bit. I know I'm probably blocking you, and I apologize for that. Make sure your connector is connected. And then same thing, I usually hold the wire and then push the booty down. So then once they're in place like that, you take a little more of the silicone and you basically put it up top as if you're caulking it in place. And like I said, the only reason for this is to help keep unwanted water from getting in there, like if you run through puddles or whatever. Just smearing it around. And it's not like anybody's ever going to see this unless they pull the intake off, so you don't have to be a Picasso with this. I mean, don't be a hack either, but just, you know, you don't have to be a Picasso with it. All right. Get all this stuff off my finger here. I got silicone all over my finger now. I think I picked my nose. All right. Dang it. It didn't go as planned because I just wiped it onto my other hand. All right. So there you go. Nicey nice, everything's in place. So now, reverse procedure to install the intake. Wipe down any debris that you're going to have on the manifold gasket mounting surface. Make sure that wiring harness is tucked up and out of the way, and so you can get it after the intake is back on, and then we're good to go. Actually, what I'm going to do too is I'm going to pull this upper shroud off, because since I got to do the mounts, I got to jack up on the motor, and the cooling fan will hit the top of the shroud on this. So if I unbolt the top shroud and take it out of the way, I have a lot of clearance. Just trying to think. Yeah, there's enough clearance between the intake and the cowl. Although there's actually more clearance if I leave the intake off. You know what? Maybe I'll leave the intake off while I do the motor mounts. All right, well, the motor mounts are going to be a separate video. So let me make a separate video for that, and then I'll finish this video up once I put this all back together. All right. I apologize. I realized that I forgot to film as I was slipping the intake in place. This emissions vapor line here that goes to the purge solenoid, you have to slip it underneath the fuel rail. I've done it before where I've forgotten all about it. You got to be really careful and tuck it up underneath without kinking the hose. It can be done, but it's extremely tricky. One thing I should have mentioned too is the captured intake bolts. I usually take them out because what happens is they hang down low, and as you're trying to slip the intake in place, these things will catch like an intake runner. I usually just take them out and then stick them in once the intake's back in place. So, sorry, I have to have my headlight on because I can't see otherwise. And these bolts, as you stick them in, you kind of have to go at an angle to get them to go past the ledge of where they sit. And I know you cannot even see this, but there again, it's near impossible for me to film this. And there's 5 per side. All right, let me get the other side in. Now on the passenger side, you have 2 that's right next to each other in the front, and on the driver's side, you have 2 that are right next to each other in the back. Otherwise, they're spaced apart. Like normally, they're about that far apart, except the 2 that are close to each other are about half the distance. All right. And of course, make sure you don't have anything catching underneath, like pinching the, like you're not pinching like hoses, and you're not pinching like wiring harnesses, stuff like that. Make sure your knock sensor harness is free and clear. This way you're not accidentally pinching it somewhere. So that can go on like that. The tab that locks this in place has a tendency to stretch. Okay. So not a big deal. And basically it's reverse procedure to install. Start at the centers and work your way out. These bolts are shouldered. You saw that collar that was on them, on the bolt. this piece here. This piece here. So this piece will actually bottom out. The bolt will become tight. Yes, there's a torque spec. No, I do not torque them. The reason being is because if this didn't have this sleeve, the bolt would never bottom out, and then all the pressure would be put onto the intake manifold. But this sleeve bottoms out the bolt, so you're not distorting the intake anymore, no matter how tight you go. So, don't be, a dum-dum and, whale them down with a 1/2-inch impact. You don't want to do something like that. But, use your head, but you don't actually, torque is not that critical on this particular application. All right, let me find my tools so I can actually tighten this thing back up. Hang on a second. All right. Again, sorry, I have to put my headlight on. And I know I always say, do as I say, not as I do. Because right now, I'm allowing the gun to start the bolt. I'm letting it float the bolts in place. So I'm not really stressing it all that much. And like I said, you cannot over tighten them. I mean, technically you can and then break the bolt, but I don't know who would be that much of an animal on these things. Now you can tighten up one side at a time on these. And as you can see, I'm not going full bore on them. And the reason you can tighten up one side at a time on this, as long as you snug them down, don't just whip one side down. But you saw I snugged up both sides and then I just started doing one side. And the reason you can do that is because it's a plastic intake. All right. So that's all good. There's nothing to worry about there. So now let's start catching everything that we got to catch. We have a fuel line there that caught. We have a PCV, which technically these aren't even PCVs in these things. It's a fixed, what they call a fixed orifice. That's that. We got that. Like I said, luckily on this one I don't have to worry about the vacuum line at the back of the intake. This just doesn't have it. Remember correctly, this bolt for some reason came out wonky. The back bolt on this one. I don't know why. Like I wonder if the I wonder if the threaded insert's getting boogered. It's possible. They do get boogered over time if they get any corrosion on them, that is. Yeah, this one's tight. Not like ridiculously tight going in, but it's just like the threads are a little boogered. That's all good. All right, so now it's going to be hooking up our fuel injectors. Disconnect those. These things usually have a lock on them, but if I remember correctly, when I worked on this thing last year, I think all the locks were all busted off of it. If I remember correctly, they were busted off and some of them were still hanging like in place. But they were just all broken to pieces. Just make sure everything gets down where it needs to be. This thing has a breather hose on this side. That is, get some kind of a breather. Yeah, it's a breather. The injector harness, where they go into the actual injectors, they click in nicely, like a nice positive click, and then it's in nice and tight. So having a lock is not going to change anything. All right, that's got to go there. This has to go there. I need to get a 10 to tighten up one nut. Alright, so now what I do is I take the studs out of the intake when I take the throttle body away like that, because it just makes your life easier. Because if you left the studs in place, you'd have to still fight with the hoses, and it's just not fun. So just as easy to take the studs out. And the studs use a, if I can even read this, an E5. They use an E5 because the end of the stud is that design. So it's an E5. You can see what I'm doing, right? Yeah. It's one of the things I always do. I tend to go off on tangents and I forget that I'm filming. And then sometimes I'll be doing stuff that's out of camera view and I'm like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of making a video. But it happens. What are you going to do? And these, you can leave them floating. They don't have to, like, see how it's screwing in? As soon as it stops, stop. You do not have to, like, tighten it down with any kind of a tool. Your fingers are enough of a tool. So now, I'll put the nuts on. It's 3 nuts that hold the throttle body in place on these. And again, as you're tightening, bring them all down a little bit. Just like that. You don't have to go bananas. There's no reason to. All right, so that's pretty much it. So there, you got to see how to change NOx sensors. And I made another video of me cutting open those NOx sensors. And you'll see what I found when I did so. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just gotta put the shroud back on, the intake back on. I got other things to do. I'm gonna make a video on changing the booster, and I'll probably make a video on changing upper control arms. So, but that's it for this video. Yeah, there's nothing else I really need to show you with this. But that's for that NOx sensor code, and you saw how the one NOx sensor was really reading off whack. And I'm thinking the other one was reading off whack too. They were supposed to be the CarQuest Premiums, and I don't think they were. I think somebody either reboxed them or they got a host of counterfeit ones. I don't know. But it is what it is. What are you going to do? Things happen. I have no control over that. All right, so hopefully you got something out of that video. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.